like to first start things off by introducing our presenters, Camille Kenville and Andrew Harkness. Camille is Chief Executive Officer of the Canadian Mental Health Association, Ontario Division. Before joining CMHA Ontario, Camille channeled her passion for mental health care in senior leadership roles in the education, governmental, and children's mental health sectors. She served as Director of Policy and Communications at the Children's Mental Health Ontario from 2005 to 2012, was Chief of Staff to Ontario's First Minister of Children and Youth Services 2003 to 2005, and Director of Policy at the Ontario Public School Boards Association from 1998 to 2003. Through her work with the Canadian Mental Health Association, Camille currently holds a number of government appointments, including the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care's Mental Health and Addictions Provincial Leadership Advisory Council, for which she currently co-chairs a working group on system alignment and capacity, the Special Advisory Table on Refugees, and the Ministry of Labour's Prevention Council. Camille is an alumni of the University of Windsor and University of Toronto. Andrew has a long family history in the labor movement. He decided to shift his career studies from economics, where he was going to be a stockbroker, to health and safety. He says that it might sound idealistic, but he wanted to contribute. He says, "I wanted to make work a good place to be." He returned to university and enrolled in labor studies, then occupational health and safety, eventually narrowing his focus to management systems and organizational health. Now, with more than 25 years of global health and safety experience, he consults in areas such as best practices for health and wellness, auditing, risk management, violence and harassment, and psychological workplace health. He is a strong advocate of psychological hazard prevention, noting that mental health issues now contribute to illness and disability as much as musculoskeletal disorders. He is involved in several CSA technical committees for physical and psychological health and safety standards development, and is vice chair of the Ontario Workplace Health Coalition, past vice chair. I'd like to welcome our presenters this morning. We look forward to hearing about the initiatives that will impact our provincial workplace locations. And now I will turn it over to our presenters.
Thank you for those kind introductions. It's Camille speaking. I'm really delighted to be part of this webinar this morning. This is a topic that means a great deal to our organization, the Canadian Mental Health Association, and I'm really delighted to be part of this today. My first order of business is I have the great pleasure of introducing a video from the Minister of Labour, Kevin Flynn. I've known Kevin for a very long time. Some of you may be aware that he has a lengthy history in the issue of workplace mental health. He was the chairman of the Select Committee on Mental Health and Addictions, which was struck in 2009. It was an all-party committee that brought together MPPs to discuss the serious issues around mental health and addictions and how they impact every citizen in Ontario. It was a really nonpartisan committee, and Kevin's leadership kept it that way. He kept everyone focused on the issues, and he did so because he feels so strongly about the importance of this issue. So long before he was Minister of Labour, he was really active in this area. And it's really a great pleasure to have the opportunity to work with him on these issues. And with that, I will just turn it over so you can now watch the video from him.
Hi, I'm Kevin Flynn, Minister of Labour for Ontario. I want to welcome all of you taking part in this webinar on such an important issue that affects millions of Canadians across the country. More and more, we're realizing that mental health issues and illnesses not only affect those suffering from them, they also affect our friends, our loved ones, and our employers. In any given year, 1 in 5 Canadians will experience a mental illness. In fact, at this moment as I speak, 500,000 Canadians are unable to work today because of mental health concerns. And that's why webinars like these are so important. Ontarians are starting to understand that for a workplace to be truly healthy and safe, we must account for both the physical and the mental well-being of workers. If any of us received a physical head injury at work, for example, we'd be sure to address that. Why should a mental health concern be any different? Psychologically healthy workplaces are more productive, they're more creative, they're more innovative. They enjoy better morale, better recruitment, and better retention of talent. Everybody benefits by recognizing mental health as the key to a healthy workplace. For the next hour, thanks to our safety partners at Workplace Safety and Prevention Services, you'll learn what goes into creating a mentally healthy workplace. You'll discover practical steps you can take to get started on a workplace mental health program. I hope this webinar will get you learning, reflecting, most importantly though, talking about good psychological health at your workplace. Because after all, starting that conversation is always the first step. Enjoy the webinar.
Let me just tell you a little bit about the Canadian Mental Health Association. Well, I thank the Minister for providing a great backdrop for us in our conversation this morning. So the face of mental health and mental illness in the workplace has really changed, and there's a tremendous amount of awareness that now exists in the workplace around mental health. This is new. I can tell you personally, I've been in the business for more than a decade. These are not conversations we were having that long ago, and we have been, without question, we have been active on this front in ways that really were unheard of even 10 or 12 years ago. So it's really quite an exciting time for us. And by that, I mean the Canadian Mental Health Association, we're a nationwide organization. We are almost 100 years old, although I like to say we don't look a day over 40. But we have been active across Canada in the last 100 years, providing mental health supports to Canadians from coast to coast to coast. And we have been very engaged in the issue of workplace mental health in Ontario for more than 15 years. And that's saying something because, as I said, this was not a topic of conversation that was really at the forefront a decade or so ago. And our work began even before the Mental Health Commission of Canada was struck. So this is something we clearly feel passionately about. In Ontario, we serve more than 500,000 Ontarians. We are a resource across the province. We have 30 branches in Ontario. We cover every part of the province. We provide many supports on different fronts, but I'm particularly proud of our workplace program, which I will tell you a little bit more about in the slides to come. So what is the challenge that we face in terms of workplace mental health? I think we could, if we were honest, we could all say that we know people that have struggled in the workplace. We know people that clearly come to work with whatever issues they may have at home, and it affects how they do their job, how they work with their colleagues, how they participate in the workforce, and how they manage themselves day to day. And it can be disruptive and it can be difficult for everybody in the workplace. We also know that it's an expensive problem. We know it's expensive for employers when people use the services of long-term disability to manage their mental health. We know that many people will not seek help or support because they know that their employer may feel differently about them. They may not want people to know. They may want to keep it confidential, but they may not be hiding it very well either. And so it is a very serious dilemma that many workplaces, every workplace faces, but many people face in those workplaces. It's a financial issue that must be addressed. So for employers, it's particularly challenging because most often what I hear from them is that they don't know really how to manage these situations. There isn't a clear-cut answer. Every issue, every mental health issue really is very different. And we should also include addictions here as well. When you think about the number of people who struggle with addictions and couple that with their mental health, this is a very significant problem in the workplace. So employers are faced with trying to find help for these people, trying to assist them so that they are functioning far better in the workplace. Not always an easy thing to do. And the whole conversation around psychological safety, again, is fairly new for people. And we find there's a great deal of interest in learning an awful lot more. So let me just give you some high-level statistics. We know that 1 in 5 people are going to experience a mental health issue every year. That is a standard number. That is not something that is new, quite honestly. I think the awareness of it is new, but the number is not new. 1 in 3 of us in our lifetime will struggle with something. That's not to say that you will have a very serious mental illness. It's to say that at some point in your life, you are going to be struggling mentally. I don't think any of us can, in good conscience, say that you don't have a family member or a friend, or you don't have a neighbor or someone you know that doesn't have a mental health issue. We are all impacted by this. So much so that if you look at the economy in Canada, this week alone, the Mental Health Commission of Canada tells us more than 500,000 people will miss work. The disability claims are exorbitant. $51 billion annually from our budget in Canada, and that's 2.8% of our gross domestic product. So these are very significant issues. And as the minister said in his video, if somebody had a physical health issue, if there was cancer, if there was any other physical health issue, we would deal with that, and we would know how to manage it, and there are clear-cut ways in which we support people. But unfortunately, I think we can all agree that's not true as it relates to mental health. So we're working very hard to assist employers on that front. And some of you may be saying, well, what is mental health, or how do I know the difference if somebody has a mental health issue or whether it's just something else that they're not managing very well? And the World Health Organization talks about a state of physical, mental, and social well-being in terms of overall health. And mental health is really not just the absence of a disease. It is much broader than that. It's a socially supported state of personal satisfaction, and that will look different for different people. But clearly, when you are in a workplace and the challenges that you face day to day, coupled with anybody who has a predisposition or maybe in a position where they're struggling with their mental health, it does get complicated. It does complicate any workplace environment. So this next slide, just again, in terms of the Canadian Mental Health Association, this is our logo, and it really just speaks to how we look at the role of physical and mental health and the development of the whole person. So we call it the fanciful man. This has been our logo for more than 40 years. And it's really the development of the whole person. And the 4 pillars, if you look at, there are 4 sides to this logo. So the 4 pillars are community service, social action, public education, and research. That just gives you a sense of who we are and how we envision every person as a whole being. So what are the benefits of addressing mental health in the workplace? Well, clearly there are many. I think they're frankly quite obvious, but they're worth commenting on. So I think we all want to be satisfied in our jobs. We all want to go home and feel that we've put in a good day's work, that we feel satisfied, that we've not only done a good job, which is important for our own personal satisfaction, but we felt that we were valued and engaged and that we were appreciated in the workplace. That makes a better attendance for everybody, better productivity. It's better for the employer, certainly, but it's also better for the morale of the employee. We want to make sure that our workplace has our back, so to speak. So in terms of allowing us accommodation, should we ever need to leave the workplace, and the ability to return to work at an appropriate time and in an appropriate manner is extremely important. And we want to make sure that we're aware, that we know where there may be triggers, we know where people have strengths and where they may have weaknesses, and we support them in their day-to-day work, and we support each other, and we support our colleagues in that work as well. So that just gives you a very broad overview, a little bit about CMHA and a little bit about the workplace. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Andrew, and he's going to take you through a few slides now as well.
Thank you, Camille. Let me just start by saying WSPS, like CMHA, is celebrating 100 years of providing safety and health expertise and resources to the province of Ontario and our workforces. We represent one of the largest sectors within the Health and Safety Association partnerships, representing more than 165,000 workplaces and close to 4 million employees. We have focused primarily in the agriculture, industrial, manufacturing, and service sectors. And we also recognize that 80% of our customers are small business, which is what we wanted to highlight in our conversations this morning as what can we be doing to continue to support small business going forward. I have to say this, while we've been in the business for 100 years of providing safety and health support, we have primarily focused over that time on safety. We have looked at making sure, doing our best workplaces will pay attention to those physical safety hazards that have led tragically to fatalities and serious injuries and the like over the years. And really, when we've had conversations about health, it has primarily been around things like occupational illness and disease. What we're encouraged about today is the greater focus on looking at health as being part of the equation. And I think Louise Bradley says it best. In 2013, when we were releasing the National Standard for Psychological Health and Safety in the Workplace, she led that charge by saying it's time that we start thinking about mental well-being in the same context as we consider physical well-being. And the standard represents a framework needed to help make this happen. Now, a national standard and management systems may not be all we can do for every organization, but we must look at the fact that since the standard was released in 2013, it has been one of the catalysts to bring more and more conversation to mental health in the workplace over these past 5 years. And we look to that as saying, let's continue to kind of grow that initiative. We took our focus on looking at mental health and its definitions similarly to where we go for expertise traditionally. So whether it's through CMHA or in this particular case, looking at the definition that is put out by the World Health Organization. And as you can see by the definition, it's not like the traditional safety issues where we talk about reducing a hazard. It's looking at more about the fact of being able to manage the normal stresses of life. We can support workers being productive and fruitful, and also being able to make a contribution to his or her community. But I think the piece that's also critical in this conversation is encouraging well-being as another primary component. So what can we be doing to make the workplace a better place for us to be, not only just by the reductions of physical hazards, and as we get into this conversation, psychological hazards as well. Now, you heard some of the stats, and we talk about 1 in 5 Canadians. Maybe this chart gives you a little bit of an understanding that's helpful to what we are meaning when we talk about mental health problems and issues. If we look on the right-hand side of this graph, you can see that we're talking about folks that are in a situation with no formal diagnoses. But above the line, we're talking about somebody who has positive mental health, no diagnosis, life is good, managing well, and that's ideally where we would like everybody to be. We may get a little bit of concern, though, when people are not having good mental health, not understanding why, no diagnosis is being made, and we're not quite sure what that future holds for us. In the top left-hand corner, you can look at somebody that has had a diagnosis, is working through their mental health concerns or issues or disorders, but in doing so in a way that is going to be positive for their mental health. And as such, they are coping and managing and supporting our definitions. Ideally, we would love to see our workforce and our population above the line as much as possible. In terms of one of the more concerning or most concerning states is when folks are in a diagnosis of a mental disorder and it's not managing itself well, and this is creating poor mental health. This may be situations where people are not going to be able to go to work today. This could be part of that 500,000 workers that are not going to work that Camille had mentioned earlier. Ideally, what we want to give thought to is that we move around in this continuum. Life gets in the way, work issues can possibly get into the way, other factors contribute. And so we may find ourselves moving around the continuum as we go through life in general. One of the things we want to pay attention to when we are bringing this conversation to the workplace, because as we said, one of the things that can be a challenge is I'm not sure why I'm feeling the way I am. Language is a critical factor. And so I ask you this question, when somebody talks about describing mental illness or people with a mental health disorder, what kind of words come to mind? And in some cases, the types of words that we see in the general conversation can actually lead us to a continuation of not wanting to bring these kinds of messages forward. Language matters and language can hurt. This leads to another term that we are interested in wanting to address in workplaces, and that is stigma. So not only from the words that are used, but what other triggers that could be considered negative and often stereotypical or unfair that our population would have, our society would have on a group or type of individual with regards to maybe how they are living, how they are managing, what their characteristics could be and the like. And our work is to try to make sure that we can create an environment where people going to work and wanting to be able to express their concerns and issues, can they do it in a way and an environment that will be both helpful and collaborative and supportive? And one of the key things to think about when we do that is what is the organization's and our workforce stigma factor and concerns. Now, stigmas can come up in a number of different areas. We can talk about stigma associated with things like ethnicity, religion. We can talk about it in terms of gender. We can talk about it in terms of a number of different factors. What we need to recognize is that stigma itself can be a huge barrier to try to get informed conversations taking place. Let's think about it in the workplace for a second. Studies will show that in many workplaces, as close to 50% of the workforce may consider conversations around mental health or a condition of mental health as really just an excuse not to be at work and producing and pulling your weight. People that are associated with mental health have been labeled as unreliable and unproductive and untrustworthy. So much so that stigma itself can be far worse than the illness. In fact, many people will talk about the fact that they spend more time trying to address the stigma concern and making sure that they look and feel normal to their colleagues and to their employer than what it is to actually manage the illness itself. So important factors for us to consider is what can we be doing to change these attitudes? So one thing you might want to consider is that Dr. Heather Stewart, who is a chair of mental health and anti-stigma research at Queen's University, and has been looking at this concern and issue for the past 5 years, offers you 5 steps that any one of us can start today. So as I mentioned before, if you were thinking about the language and the terms that we've used in the areas of mental health in the past, language matters. What can I do and you to encourage proper wording? Put the person first, not the disease. So it's not a matter of talking about somebody that is schizophrenic or diabetic. We're talking about somebody that is a person living with diabetes, a person living with schizophrenia. Education. Much of what comes into stigma is a lack of good information and people making judgments on partial nuggets of truth, but not enough to really be informed. So look at ways that we can raise the education level in our workplaces with our workforce to help be in an informed conversation. Kindness and patience. This is about trying to see that people are on their own journeys and people do have challenges and issues. We can be so quick to judge and so quick to make a decision based on, again, partial knowledge. Kindness can be reaching out. We've heard mental health issues being positioned as this is not the kind of illness or disease that people are going to bring home a casserole for the family when you're off sick and sending cards and all these other sort of conditions and support mechanisms that we have in place when we talk about other types of illnesses and disease. So really, this is wanting to spend more time getting on and understanding where people are and what can we do to help. Listen and ask. Thinking about what can we do to help might be the first words out of our mouth, and then listen. Being able to ensure that people have a comfort working with us and knowing that we're not judging, and basically what we want to try to figure out is how can we make you successful? How can we help you be at work, be safe, be healthy, and be productive? And probably one of the basic things that we can do is break the silence itself. Let's increase the dialogue. Let's talk about this. Let's do things at work like lunch and learns and promotions and awareness conversations that can help us advance the discussion. We're not alone in terms of moving mental health forward. If you think about some of the legislative concepts that are out there and driving things like accommodation and return to work and ethics and behaviors in workplaces, think about the Accessibilities for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. We can look at the Ontario Human Rights Code, and we can talk about occupational health and safety legislation. These are all taking steps to talk about making sure that people have the equality and the rights to be able to work and to be able to be safe in the work and be treated in a fair and humane and ethical manner. I mentioned a couple of minutes ago that we talked about this national standard that was released in 2013. And again, this may be seen as a leading practices type of resource to many workplaces, but I honestly believe one of the gifts that was provided as part of this work was a clear focusing on some of the things that workplaces can be doing right now that can be positively influencing their workplace environment. In fact, what I say about these is that we're talking about how we organize our work and how we manage our people. And these 13 factors, based on research provided through previous work with Health Canada, previous work and ongoing work with Guardian Minds at Work, and as well as putting the national standard together, represent not all of the factors that can influence mental health in the workplace, but 13 of the ones that seem to have the most influence, and these would be the ones that we want to start with. I want to take you through a couple of these that I think are most relevant to our general conversation. People do ask, are these in any sort of chronological order? What do I do first? Or do I have to do all 13? And basically the response to that is these are intended to provide broad-based support to any organization. And things like needs assessments and other tools can be helpful in determining which ones you want to do first. But here's the ones that I'm going to suggest to you that I would want to pay attention to as my base program to get started, even before I might want to think about doing things like surveys and needs assessments. So the first one I would be paying attention to is psychological and social support. This is where we talk about aspects of what mechanisms we have in place that are going to support the mental health and safety of our employees. This may be the Human Rights Department, our Human Resources Department, our resources around policies and programs and practices, our support mechanisms that may include things like our benefit programs and drug plans, and things like EFAP, EAP programs that could support people as they're kind of working through life. But it's also maybe some of the more informal means, what we call the social support. Are we an environment that supports teams and colleagues? Do we have a sense that if I am talking to a colleague about my psychological state and maybe some challenges and issues that I may be running into, do I have their support? Do I have their back? If I'm going to talk to my supervisor, my manager, with respect to things like workload and coping mechanisms and challenges that I'm running into in my workplace, am I going to have the support to be able to feel that I can have those conversations in a way that will, again, continue to support my mental health? So I do believe psychological and social support is just one of those underpinnings that should be a strong part of our workplace environment. The next one is civility and respect. And especially for Ontario, because over the past 6 years, we've been spending a lot more time on conversations around legislation associated with violence and harassment in the workplace. And basically, when organizations are looking to those legal requirements, they're looking at the fact that, okay, these events are taking place in our workplace, whether it's violence, whether it's bullying, whether it's harassment activities, and we don't want those to occur. But we don't want to find out about it at a time when the legislation drives us to do reporting and investigation. What we really want to be able to do is say, what are the core reasons? What's the underlying cause that may be creating these kinds of behaviors that are not going to be supported in our organization? And that's where we want to focus on civility and respect. How are people treating each other? How are they being treated by others in terms of whether that's supervision and management or whether that's customers, clients, and our members of the public? So basically, people should feel that there is a code of ethics, a standard of behaviors, that when we have those in place, when situations arise where a bullying or a discriminating or a harassing type of behavior is acknowledged, that we take steps to address that before it actually becomes an issue. Psychological demands. This is the area that I think has got the most opportunity for maybe how we have looked at workplace health and safety in the past. Many organizations today do things like physical demands analysis and job task analysis. We look at what the physical demands of work can be. What we want to now do is consider it in a more balanced way. So what are the psychological demands that are associated with the tasks and activities that we ask of our workers? Taking a look at things like decision-making, deadlines, workload, the ability to control and have discretion over work. All of these are factors that when we actually look into them can be having such a more significant impact on things like fit. Are people in the right work, doing the right work, and the stuff that's giving them the most satisfaction and where their competencies lies? So to me, when we can marry psychological demands and physical demands up, and then realize that that gives us as a workplace a much more comprehensive picture of what's going on. Psychological protection. This, I think, is one of the most critical factors to consider, because when we talk about people being psychologically safe at work, this goes even back to the basic legislation that we have with respect to workplace health and safety. For example, the right to refuse unsafe work. And to be honest, if somebody does not feel that they are in a position to be psychologically safe and to be able to express their concerns and issues or exercise their rights for fear of recrimination or penalty, punishment, or being fired, it really undermines the ability of the organization to truly be able to have people participate with a sense of collaboration and freedom, and to be critically constructive. All the more so when we talk about psychological protection from the perspective of stigma reduction. If 75% of the workforce is not comfortable talking to their manager about their mental health and concerns, we need to be able to make sure that psychological protection is advancing in this area as well, to help people feel that, yes, when they do talk to their team, their organization, that it matters and that there's things that we can do about it. The last one I'll touch on is the protection of physical safety. This is the area that, as I mentioned in our introduction, we're an organization of 100 years, both CMHA and WSPS and our system partners, and we focused on physical safety as the starting point, and rightly so. We really can't have the other conversations in terms of creating positive work environments without ensuring that our staff believe that their physical safety is being protected. It has two concerns of the psychological prevention programs that we're addressing here today. One of them is, if I am worried about my physical safety, I'm worried about doing the work in the day-to-day functions, and the equipment I'm utilizing or the conditions I'm working in are stressing me because I don't believe I'm actually safe to be able to do that work. That's one side of it. And on the second side, it is, I don't start looking at my higher levels of needs in terms of some of the other mental health factors that we're going to discuss through this presentation, if I don't feel that, again, I have a solid layer of physical protection in place. So I've taken you through very quickly 5 of the workplace factors that we believe are really good starting points and focal points for workplaces to move forward. I want to just put a quick plug in here, because these screenshots that you saw were courtesy of Ottawa Public Health and the work that they did with the Mental Health Commission to actually create video vignettes for each of the 13 factors. And I'm encouraging you to, after this video is over, to go and take a look at the remaining 13 of those slides, of those video vignettes, and consider them as being a good starting point for raising conversations in your workplaces and getting people moving forward in the discussion. So the next question, are you ready for this? And one of the areas that you might want to give some thought to is, organizationally, how do we want to advance our discussions on mental health in the workplace? We're going to suggest that there's 5 areas that can kind of help set you up for success. What is our organizational awareness at this state? Are we in a position where people understand what the issues are? Do we have an appetite and a desire to actually do something about this, and to what extent? And this is important because some of the things that we get involved with in workplace mental health can be messy, can take time. There is no quick magic pill here. We need to raise and have a level of knowledge where people can have informed conversations. Organizationally, do we have the ability to be able to take this message forward and be able to address that? Do we have the time? Do we have the support? Do we have the mechanisms? Do we know what is available in the community to help us out? And finally, do we have the resources? Now, many workplaces may not have internal to them resources, but what about in the community and external resources? What's available to you to help move that messaging forward? For WSPS, we kind of look at 3 areas that might be a good way for organizations to kind of figure out where might they want to be able to go first. So in the terms of getting started, that to me would be organizations that are looking to raise mental health literacy, to look at opportunities to reduce stigma and understand it, and to raise the vocabulary of an organization. When we have that, think of those as the building blocks. We move forward and start looking at what might we want to put in place for our own mental health programs. Can I look at doing some needs assessments and program development? I might want to consider the organizational workplace factors that we just talked about briefly in the past couple of slides. This is the gaining momentum part. This is where we now start to see more formality of programming. But we also have organizations that are looking for leading practices. And we mentioned that the national standard is one of those types of leading practices. We're proud of the fact that that was the first standard in the world that was put out to guide workplaces on psychological health and safety in our workplaces here in Canada. So it is definitely a leading practice that organizations can use to put a framework in place and be able to advance psychological health and safety in a very proactive and continual improvement type of context. So this leads me to an announcement that we would like to make to direct you to look at where some of these resources can be made available to you. So launching today, you will now be able to access thinkmentalhealth.ca as a website that is being put in place to help organizations get to resources. They can be along the lines of following those 3 streams that we mentioned in the previous slide, but they also are designed as a way for organizations to get access to and link to help and resources that, as we put them together, are designed or selected to support smaller to medium-sized workplaces that could be under-resourced. And we can also give you some guidance through the website in terms of what might you want to do first, what should we do next, and how might we want to be able to address that. So I'm encouraging you to take some time and now go and visit the website. You will see that it's chock full of resources that we believe are going to be helpful for Ontario workplaces going forward. The 2 resources that we've talked about in this webinar are included on the website. So go and take a look at havethattalk.ca with regards to the video vignettes I mentioned too. And I'm going to turn it back over to Camille at this point in time, and she's going to talk about one of the key CMHA resources that also will sit on the website.
Thank you, Andrew. This is fantastic, and you just did a superb job leading us through an awful lot of information. So I'm going to go off script for a second and pick up one of the points you raised, which is that the psychological standard really does put us ahead when you think about what's going on, not only in North America, but frankly around the world. I had the opportunity to attend an international mental health conference earlier this year, and I did a whole segment on workplace mental health, and it was very evident that Canada is leading the way on that front, and we have a lot to be proud of. So I would encourage you, as Andrew did, to look at the additional resources that are available and to use them and to utilize them in your workplace. And so I will now shamelessly self-promote one program that we have, which is called Mental Health Works. It's a product of the Canadian Mental Health Association, and it was developed in Ontario, and I'm very proud to say that. It was long before I was with the organization, but it was ahead of its time, and we have scaled this now across the country. So this is available anywhere in the country, and it is a social enterprise, and that's perhaps what I'm most proud of. So we don't make any money off of this program. That was never the intent. Our intent was entirely to make sure that people in workplaces have the resources they need to manage their mental health. And so that's why I feel comfortable self-promoting it, because we're not making money off of it. Any dollars that we realize are really just invested back in the program for additional resources, and so that we can have a broader reach. So let me just then tell you briefly. It includes workshops, presentations, webinars. We do this all from an evidence base. We are working very hard to be solutions focused. We are trying to build awareness. We want to make sure that people in workplaces can manage challenging situations, and we collaborate with you and we stay with you through that process. So it is an arc, it is an arc as we call it. So we want to raise awareness, certainly. We want to respond to critical issues in workplaces, and we want to collaborate with you over the long term to ensure that you continue to have a psychologically healthy, safe workplace. But also so that you know where you can go to get the types of resources you need at a not-for-profit price. So our philosophy, as I said, is to ensure that we're not only evidence-based but person-centered. We recognize every workplace is different, every individual is different. We are solutions-focused. We are very anxious to help people manage acute problems in their workplace, but also build upon those to ensure that they continue to have an ongoing basis of support and people who have the tools that they need to manage themselves out of situations, so that you're not constantly having to get outside help, but we give you the capacity and build in those tools and solutions for you right in your workplace. And so to do that, we try to make sure it's flexible and it's adaptable to your workplace. So we have 3 different workshops available. Some people feel they want to start with 1 hour to just get a sense of who we are and what we offer. And likewise, others will say, well, give us a half a day because we think there are some issues here, or maybe there aren't issues in their minds, but they want to raise awareness, and then likely they will discover there are probably a few issues. Or maybe you want a much more intensive kind of 6-hour session with some or all of your staff. So again, we try to be flexible on that. And I will just give a further plug and say that this summer we have a group of experts coming in. They are going to take a week and do a very intensive training and redevelopment of some of our curriculum. So I'm really very excited about what we will be offering in the months to come, because we will be adding to our existing programs and having an even more extensive menu of available resources. So Andrew, I have found this to be a lot of fun with you, and I've learned a lot from what you've said. And I'm really happy now to have the opportunity to open it up for some questions, if there are some that folks that have been on the webinar would like to ask.
Maybe while we're waiting, I can anticipate a question or two about what you might find on the website, Effective Now. And a couple things I think are going to be of interest to you. We looked for resources that were going to be free to low cost, readily acceptable, current, evidence-based, and generally with an Ontario or Canadian flavor. One of the things that we've noticed in the working with workplaces over the past 5 years in this area is that there are a wealth of these kinds of resources and tools available, but navigating through and being able to use them in the best way possible is really what we're hoping that the website can assist organizations. There's a database that's actually downloadable on this website, so you can bring that into your own intranet site so that the resources can now be part of your immediate access, and we'll continue to keep that database up to date with, again, tools and resources that might help any organization on its journey, whether you're just getting started, whether you are gaining momentum or looking to raise the bar.
So we have a couple of questions that we can see on the screen now. Lisa is asking, how can we find the workshop information? Well, Andrew, do you want to speak again to the site, and then I'll...
I can. This will be posted on the WSPS and the thinkmentalhealth.ca website very shortly after the end of this webinar.
And those resources, I would start there, and certainly the Canadian Mental Health Association Ontario Division has some on their site as well. And Karen is asking, what type of training resources would you recommend for an organization with young or new workers with no mental health programming to begin with?
So I might look to tools that can be directed towards awareness, stigma reduction. A lot of what you're going to find on the website are going to be video-based and video vignettes in whiteboard type of technology, which we do find is more appealing to, say, a younger workforce, which is helpful to again, sort of connect with. But you can also be looking to the links that are on the website that will take them to whether it's CMHA or the Mental Health Commission of Canada, where on their sites, not only do they have a workplace focus, but they also have a civilian and community, and in many cases, a young and or in terms of maybe a vulnerable community environments to be able to look at resources in those areas to support as well. I think the key piece is to trying to gauge where is your organization in terms of its readiness state, and then being able to look at the types of training programs that are going to be appropriate to your needs.
I agree. I think that's really well said, Andrew. And I would just add, Karen, that I'm really impressed that you're thinking about kind of the demographics of your employees and what might fit best. My sense is that even if you have an older workplace, or if you have people who in fact have struggle with their mental health and are coming back, I think all of what Andrew described is still helpful for them as well. So if there are others that are on the webinar that are interested in that kind of support, then by all means, I think that is probably fitting for all workplaces. And this gives you some contact information, including a number, which is always helpful. So WSPS.ca, and the number is there as well for workplace safety and prevention services. So seeing no further questions.
I think it's safe to say we can close the webinar. Thank you very much for attending this morning.
Thank you, Andrew. That's you did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Camille.